everybody. Two drunk dudes in a gun room. As always, this show is brought to you by Operation Encore. They are a 501c nonprofit helping veterans become rock stars. So if you can go over to operationencore.org, hit that little donate button, or at least check out their social medias and give them a follow. It would be greatly appreciated. Hey, today's episode is going to be one of those topics. It's been in the news, it's been in the movies, it's been a lot of people talking about, and for good reason. It's something that should definitely be looked at and done about. And today we're going to dig into it. So today we have Miss Amanda Blackwood. Amanda Blackwood is a survivor of human trafficking who is now an accomplished artist and author, public speaker, podcast host, and trauma recovery mentor. Despite the numerous challenges she faced, she was able to emerge stronger with the help of her faith. Amanda has shared her story on various platforms such as international summits and radio programs, and has published over a dozen books. Her two main podcasts seek to provide insights into healing from trauma, always looking for a way to help. A portion of every book Amanda sells will go to help fight human trafficking. Let's bring on Miss Amanda Blackwood. Hey, how's it going?
I am so fantastic. Thank you so much, Donald. And I love that your podcast is sponsored by and wanting to help military veterans. My grandfather, my father, my brother were all military, and I'm married to a Navy vet.
That is awesome. Yeah, that is all we do. I retired in 2014 from the Army, and man, that's what my nonprofit's all about. And Operation Encore has helped me get my radio station going for veterans. So I definitely share everything I can about them because they're a great organization.
Well, I'm going to be giving them a follow.
I appreciate it. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit of back history about yourself? Where'd you grow up, and anything else you'd like them to know?
So my father, being military, of course, we moved around a lot. I was born in Germany, but I'm not German. I get that question all the time because a lot of people don't understand that dual citizenship doesn't work in other countries the way it works here.
Yep.
Just because you're born in Germany doesn't mean you're automatically a German citizen. So both my parents were American. My mother's from Arkansas, a Democrat. My father was from New York, a Republican. So you can imagine the dynamics in that household.
That's definitely different.
It was pretty tumultuous.
Yeah.
We moved around a lot. We came back to the States when I was 2.5. So I don't remember a whole lot of Germany, but I have little pieces here and there. We moved to Maryland, and from there we moved to Arkansas, California, Utah. I left on my own 2 days after I turned 18. You can tell I was in a hurry to get out of the way. In total, I have moved 43 times in my life, so I can't say I was ever really from anywhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the Army, it's always where you hang your hat anyways. That's where you're from and where you're at. So, and my daughter was born in Germany as well. So she was born in Landstuhl. Yep.
Yeah, I was born at the Landstuhl Hospital,
Yep.
just outside of Cape Town.
Yep, absolutely. So we did 3 years in Baumholder. That's where we were at.
Wow. Yeah, small world.
Yeah.
We were neighbors.
Yeah. So I know there's a lot of, the movie just came out, Sounds of Freedom, and it's gotten people talking. And I think there's a lot of, I think people have an image of what they think human trafficking is. What do you think some of the misnomers or misconceptions of it is?
Oh my gosh, there's so many.
Yeah, I'm sure.
There is a massive laundry list, and that movie that you just mentioned gets under my skin because of it. So it's important to break it down to understand, first of all, what human trafficking is.
Okay.
I always tell people this isn't really something that you should look up on Google or look up on Wikipedia, because these are fallible, human-run websites where anybody can have an input.
Yep.
So you want to go somewhere that's going to be a reliable source of information, such as the Department of Homeland Security. Their definition of human trafficking says that human trafficking is the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain commercial sex acts or labor from another person. So right off the bat, we are noticing that there's no mention of transportation, even though in our head we think of trafficking as being in traffic.
Yep.
That's not the case. Human trafficking and human trafficking are two completely separate issues that definitely need to be addressed. But they are separate issues that often overlap. So they get confused.
Yeah. I listened to a podcast, and I can't remember who it was on, and they were talking about this topic, and the topic that they were talking about was the Epstein case. And the one thing that I didn't know, I always pictured, just from news media and me not doing my own research, I pictured people being kidnapped and forced to places, but that wasn't, the more I listened to the story, that really wasn't the case of what was going on. It was more of like blackmail and holding carrots in front of people's face to get them to do things that they wanted done. And just similar to like what you said, they were using leverage against them to get them to do things that they wanted them to do. And it wasn't necessarily that anybody was being handcuffed and tied and put in closets. They were being bound by mental strengths and leverage against them to get them to do things. So, yeah, and I never knew that until I heard that on the podcast. I want to say it was a Sean Ryan show, but I can't honestly remember.
Well, and the kidnapping scenarios do occur, but that's only about 1 to 2% of all victims. Right. And if you think about it, it totally makes sense. Because if somebody were to snatch you off of the street, what would you do? You fight like hell, right? You would want to fight for your life because your life depends on it.
Yeah.
So those kind of people are going to be really difficult to force into commercial sex acts or labor, but you're going to want to use somebody that already knows you and already trusts you. So that's who these predators typically are. A lot of people don't want to admit to this, but the majority of human trafficking happens when parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, boyfriends and girlfriends are the traffickers.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's also, when you hear that definition, it's kind of surprising that there's no mention of age, because we also have this idea that trafficking only happens to young kids, right?
Yeah.
It's all about save the children. Well, that's not the case at all. Only 1/4 of all victims are under the age of 18. I was trafficked 3 different times. The first time when I was 18, the second time when I was 19, and the third time when I was 31 years old.
Wow. So I drove truck when I first retired out of the military for 6 years, and the trucking industry, the companies anyways, they're big on this topic as far as using truckers to alert people of just things that are weird. I personally had a sticker that I put in my little window. It was just a place that if somebody was being forced to do something that they didn't want to do. Now we're talking primarily about prostitutions in the truck stop area and stuff. A girl or somebody comes knocking on the door and they see that sticker tells them, hey, I'm somebody you can confide in. If you need help, let me know and I will get you help. And so even as truckers, we have that image because that's what we're thinking of. We're thinking of, somebody forcing girls out in the truck stops to go truck to truck, trying to earn money from favors and whatnot. And so even in the trucking industry, that is a big steward of this, that's still the thing that they talk to us about, is the forced sexual acts, and there is a whole lot of different things. Just like you said, I kind of feel like I seen it a little bit with the government when I was stationed in Qatar. It wasn't the same. I wasn't sure because, again, of what we identify as trafficking. But, when you're in Qatar, the way they pay the people, that, it's not going to be a Qatari that works for you. It'll be an immigrant that is working over there. And we hired contracting companies to bring us laborers, mechanics, and so forth to do work. And they all did the same jobs, but they all got paid different wages based off of the country they came from. And the more that I looked at it, because I'd have some Indian workers and some Philippine workers. And at the end of the day, they did the same jobs, but the standard of living, even when they went to where the contractors had them living, wasn't the same.
Right.
And as I started asking questions and learning, that's kind of the culture in Qatar. That's just the way it is. If you're indie, which is what they consider the bottom of the barrel, they are literally hot bunking, and they're put in a house with, if it's a 2-bedroom, there will be 8 people, 9, 10 people in that house, and each bed will hold 2 people. So one will be working a 12-hour day shift and one will be working a 12-hour night shift, and they will be sharing the same bed. One will be working, one will be sleeping. And so I looked at this and I was like, man, this just seems like slave labor, and I wasn't sure because, again, it's not what we are taught, that's not trafficking. There was nobody with a gun to their head. They came and went, and they could walk free amongst Qatar, and they could even go home anytime they wanted to. They didn't have to stay there. So
Yeah.
it seemed odd.
My last time being trafficked, I was able to get out and walk around too.
Yeah. Hey, have you ever wanted to be a part of this show? You now have the opportunity to be a part of the Two Drunk Dudes in a Gunroom show. We have worked with a nonprofit that is starting called Heroes Voices Media Foundation. We are trying to help this foundation get built. You can be a part of it by sponsoring our show. Go to twodrunkdudesinAgunroom.com, sponsor the show, and you will be a part of an amazing organization that will be helping veterans. Thank you. Now let's get back to the show.
And that's going to be the majority of cases. Yeah. And when we talk about the people who are being forced into prostitution, it's some astronomical number, like 95% of all people in prostitution are there because they're being trafficked. Most of them don't know it. And the reason they don't know it is because of the definition that I was just talking about and what we perceive to be human trafficking. Somebody might think to themselves, what I'm going through is absolutely horrible. And I hate that my boyfriend is doing this to me, or I hate that my parents are doing this to me. But this is my family. This is all I know. And I can't leave because I don't have a choice. And it's not really human trafficking because I'm not 14 years old. I'm 20.
Yeah.
And nobody is chaining me up or tying me up and throwing me in a closet in the middle of the night. I keep coming back because I love them. And I don't want to get them in trouble. It's the same mentality that you will see in domestic violence survivors. They keep going back.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that makes complete sense. And it's that mental leverage that they're holding them in prison in their own heads.
Right.
And those are the chains, not cuffs or bounds on their body. They're mentally being held captive.
Right. Last time I was trafficked, it was a police officer in Scotland.
Of all people.
Yeah. I'd known the man for 7 years before I ever went over there. When I got there, it took him 7 days to start trafficking me. He had my passport. He had my driver's license, my debit card, everything that told anybody who I was. And he had authority within the town, within that area where we lived, because he was a police officer. He was a known police officer. He was supposedly an upstanding citizen and people really respected him. But in that revolving door, when people kept coming in, there were judges and lawyers and other police officers. Who was I supposed to go to for help in that situation? Yeah. You really don't have options sometimes.
Yeah, you don't. No, yeah. That would seem like a really a helpless case because you're seeing everybody that runs everything around you, all of any of authority. And even if you did find somebody legit, more than likely, as the investigation goes, the wrong people are going to find out and it's going to get shut down, you know? So yeah, that would be a horrible situation.
And it's funny. I did actually, I'm enjoying this conversation. Sorry. But I did actually try to report him afterward. When I got back to the States, he kept on trying to find me and he was sabotaging me. He had taken a bunch of photos and videos of all the stuff that happened to me while I was there. When I got back and I'm trying to rebuild my life, he'd take all the stuff, and then he would put it all in an email and send it to my new boss or a friend, and he would sabotage everything that I was doing in my life and try to pull it to pieces. And it pissed me off. And I don't know if you can see this or not, but I got very, very red hair. You don't piss off the redhead. So I reached out to his superior offices there in that area of Scotland. I almost said the town name. I don't want to do that. But I reached out to his bosses to tell them what all had happened. And here's my email proof that was sent to my most recent boss, and he shared it with me to let me know I wasn't working there anymore. And, I'm telling them this is what happened. They said, well, we need explicit details. Okay. Well, with trauma, it creates Swiss cheese in your brain. I had a bunch of holes. I couldn't remember names. I had no idea what date anything happened other than the day I got there and the day I left.
Yeah.
So I tried to piece it together as best I could. I worked so hard on this, and I was so isolated and completely alone in the whole world because I couldn't tell anybody what was going on or what was happening to me. I couldn't share any of it. And in the end, they said, okay, give us some time and we will get back to you. In about 2 months, I got a paper letter from them saying, we see no signs of evidence or evidence of abuse. Of course. They claim they did a full investigation.
Yeah.
But it's pretty much impossible to prosecute somebody from one state line to another for human trafficking. Yeah. Internationally, it is impossible.
And it's just like, seems amazing that he would go to so many extents just to continue to make your life miserable, instead of just moving on. I mean, he got away with it, obviously, and you would think that he would just move on, and I'm sure he still was moving on and trying to find another victim. I'm sure he didn't stop becoming a predator, but to just hold that kind of a grudge, knowing that he still didn't have the power of you, but I'm still going to make your life a living hell to prove to you I can still reach out and touch, and
there was a sense of ownership.
Yeah.
He owned me. A lot of people don't realize that. Same with domestic violence. When somebody leaves one of these situations, that is the most dangerous time for them. 100%. The majority of murders within domestic violence situations occur when one person is trying to leave the other or has already left.
Yeah.
They hunt. And they will hunt you down like it's the greatest game of their life. I mean, I left there in June of 2011. And in 2019, I found out that this man made me famous on a pornography website, once again, with all of this stuff, because he couldn't find me any other way. And he included whatever social media information that he could find on me. And people were finding me and stalking me on Facebook and figuring out where I lived and giving him that information, I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
I was recognized in a grocery store and asked for my autograph. And now, years ago, I lived in LA for a number of years. I was on Alias and Will and Grace, and I modeled for Harley Davidson, and I did a lot of really cool stuff in the about 2004, 2006 area. I did a lot of stuff. That's not what I was recognized for. And that broke me, and it broke my heart.
Yeah.
I had moved away from California. I had moved to Colorado. It was in a completely different town, different state. I'd started over my life. I used to have really short hair. I grew my hair out. At one time, I actually tried to dye it a different color because I was trying to be somebody else completely.
Yeah.
Nothing was going to work to make this stop. So that's when I said, if people are going to be finding me, they're going to find out why. That was when I started speaking up.
That's awesome. Yeah, I cannot believe the nerve of somebody to walk up in a grocery store and I'll be honest, even if it was a legitimate actress that was in that business, I still couldn't even imagine walking up into a grocery store and asking for an autograph.
He did it like it was a badge of honor. And I had to educate him. And I didn't believe the statistic at the time, but I still knew the statistic. Now I tend to believe it a bit more because I've talked to a lot of other people.
Mhm.
85% of all modern pornography is created using victims of human trafficking.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't know it either until then.
I could see that. I mean, that industry is I guess anything else that can be addictive. It can, it's gonna have a like interest side, and then the hole just keeps getting darker and darker and darker as it brings you in. And I think that industry, just like you said, I mean, everybody does know that, pornography does have that dark side, whether it be child pornography or human trafficking. Everybody knows, that stuff exists, but I don't think anybody thinks about it. And I don't think anybody thinks about trafficking the way you just said it. So then when they see legitimate porn sites that anybody can go to, and nobody's trying to shut it down, it's not making media, news, that people are thinking those are just people that are trying to make money and doing it, on their own. But then when you think about this, well, of course that's the way it looks, because they're not being held captive physically, they're being held captive mentally. And
Yeah,
it's like Facebook, the cover looks amazing, but you don't see what's going on the backside of the cover.
absolutely. And
So
the OnlyFans sites, there was a recent study done where more than half of the people with their OnlyFans pages have admitted that it was somebody else who was coercing them into having the page in the first place.
really,
That's human trafficking.
so I had a female soldier. She was one of my soldiers, on our show. She was a part of season one, and the only reason why she was my soldier is they sent her to me because she was um, sexually assaulted, and when she claimed it, the Army did what the Army's good at, and they covered it up. And um, they sent her to me, and at that time, I was already, having issues with PTSD without admitting it, and so I didn't even know the symptoms of trauma and how people dealt with things and whatever. And she got in trouble for marijuana. And my first aunt, who was originally part of this podcast, was able to get her to be able to stay in the military. And then she got caught a second time, and they kicked her out. And it's funny that you say that, and I'm gonna tell you where it ties, is because when she came on the show, um, we didn't really know this at the time, but she had a job as working in a dealership, and she said the dealership, one day she came to work, and like the cops and FBI and everybody walked in, told all the employees to grab their personal stuff and leave. Check back in a few months, you may or may not have a job still. And something was going on with that dealership, and she was out of a job, and she had bills. And so she, out of desperation, said that she started an OnlyFans um, site, and was talking about the money. And she was, back to doing weed, and I'm sure, maybe some other things, I don't know. And so it just kind of makes me wonder now, you know, because it was going through my head, what had happened in the Army. And then she, and she did talk about that. She talked about why it was, she decided it was different because now things was under her terms versus
Yeah.
then. And so it could be, but I don't know much about OnlyFans. And so, that was my exposure to OnlyFans, is what she was saying. And then when you said that too, I knew that there was, porn sites, because you do see it. And so I thought, well, hell, maybe she's tied into something like that too, and don't even know it.
It's entirely possible. And I'm never surprised when I hear about a sexual assault victim who turns around and does something like this. I
Yeah.
was at one time, but I'm not now that I've learned so much more about trauma reactions. This is a trauma reaction. This
Okay.
is somebody who's traumatized and who I called it slices of my soul. People that were coming into that house in Scotland, they were taking slices of my soul.
I can see that.
There were pieces of me that were missing and being dragged away from me and being pulled away. And for a while afterward, I had this idea in my head that if I did this by choice, nobody's going to take it away from me. And maybe I can hold on to those pieces of my soul. Because if I don't do this by choice, somebody's going to take it away from me anyway. My assaults started happening when I was 4.
Oh, wow.
4 years old. So I grew up in this household where my father was abusive physically. My mother was mentally and emotionally just manipulative and horribly abusive. And my brother was my first molester when I was 4. He was 7. So
Wow.
something had happened to him and he was trying to work it out in his own head. I don't blame him for what happened. He believes that I do. And he also tries to deny that it ever happened. It's not his fault. He was 7 years old.
Right.
But there was all of this happening the whole time I was growing up. And when you learn at 4 years old, being the baby of the family, that nobody is going to step in and protect you and help you, and you don't have extended family you can lean on, you just learn that this is where your lot in life. This is the way it's going to be. And the people who love you are the ones who are going to hurt you. And if they don't hurt you, that means they don't love you. So I was constantly seeking out more of the same familiar habits because this was what felt right and comfortable to me. Even though it was terribly wrong, and in the forefront of my mind, I knew it was wrong. Subconsciously, I was constantly seeking this out. And I did exactly what she did. After that many sexual assaults, after that many people taking those pieces of me, those slices of my soul, I started using it so that I could get what it was that I needed out of life instead of waiting for somebody else to take what they wanted. I was using myself to have a roof over my head or to make friends.
Yeah.
That's
I,
a terrible place to be.
yeah. I mean, I could see that. It's kind of, not the extent of it, but it's kind of that same thing of, the kid that at school that gets made fun of, and then he figures everybody's going to make fun of him anyway. So if he starts making fun of himself, other people laugh. And so now that they're laughing at him, that's okay because he did it. And it's kind of a saddening experience to see that because it's just desperation of trying to get that attention. And it's also the same thing that you was just saying earlier that, that's another tie with the battered um, um, domestic violence situations where that person gets beat so many times and they just keep going back. The cops get involved and maybe they're separated for a while, and next thing you know, they're back together again. Well, he promised he's not going to do it no more. He loves me, but it's just because now there's nobody beating on him, but there's nobody. It's
Right.
not, at least when somebody was beating on him, there was somebody, but now there's nobody, and so they would rather have that than to be alone and feel like nobody cares. And
Yeah.
so I get that. I do get that. And that in itself is sad,
It's a moment of desperation when you take somebody like that back repeatedly. You're so desperate. You've been told and made to believe that you are not worth more than what you've been receiving. Nobody is going to love you the way I do.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to take you in. You're too fat. You're too ugly. You're too skinny. You're too tall. You're too short. Your feet are too big. Nobody's going to love you or want you except for me. It's a way of getting into their head and controlling them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I could completely see that. And, it's also, it's like the longer this goes on, you were like you were saying, you've had this situation happen multiple times, and it almost seems like it would, after the first time, it just sets it up for it to be that much easier for the next person because
Yeah.
you're still vulnerable now, you know. And after the first one happens and then it happens again, you start believing, well, that's the way it is. This is what's going to happen to me, you know?
Yeah, this is my life. This is what it's supposed to be. And one of the most dangerous things that we do to ourselves or to our friends is tell somebody, you've been through worse. You can get through this too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I can't stand that.
Yeah. Eventually, you're going to pile up so many stones that you're going to build a mountain that you can't climb.
Yep.
We have to stop doing that because, yeah, maybe you have been through something else that in your perception might have been worse, but trauma is trauma is trauma is trauma. And
Yeah.
it's not better or worse, and it's not a challenge, and it's not a comparison. It's going to affect you every single time. And it's not a comparison as in which one's worse. It's a how high can you build this tower because all it's going to do is stack.
Yeah. You know, that's one of the problems that's happening in the veteran community. And we have a tendency, even as veterans, to look down and we discount, you know, if you were that infantry guy or that, you know, Navy SEAL or whatever, and that guy says he has PTSD, we automatically say, oh yeah, I get that. I get that. But then you got that admin clerk that never left the base, that worked, is still deployed and had rockets shot at him, but he never fired his weapon, or she never fired her weapon, or either, you know, it doesn't matter. They never went on convoys. They never had no IDs exploded at them. And then when they file that claim, people are like, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They never even left the base. But what we don't take in consideration is we don't know where that person grew up, because at the end of the day, that person could have been that person that had a very glorious childhood. And if they skinned their knee, there was somebody there to wipe it up and clean it up. And now a simple fender bender could be trauma to them.
Yeah.
And then you got somebody else that was being shot at every day growing up in school because of where they lived. And it takes more than just that to affect them. But like you said, trauma is trauma. And to each, you can't compare what is trauma to that person to this person, because everybody is going to have it impact them in a different way. And as veterans, we do that to each other. We automatically think that if I'm hurting, I have to hurt worse than you, and you're faking because you didn't do as much as I did. Or if I got over it, what is your problem? I fixed it. Why can't you? And so when I hear those things, it's like my pet peeve. You know, instantly I get mad and I start educating people, because
We don't get trophies for trauma.
right. Yeah, there's no trophies, there's no comparison, and we're not in their head. It's not for us to judge.
Yeah.
You know. So I do get that, you know, even though I can't relate in those aspects, but I can relate that on our side that type of stuff is still impacted and it's still being done.
Absolutely. This is like my life's work now, is trying to help people to navigate their trauma reactions. A lot of people don't realize that there's long-term consequences to not dealing with your trauma reactions.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, like self-medication. Let's talk about marijuana there. It's a self-medication thing. You were looking for something to make you feel a little more relaxed or numb because you can't deal with the realities of life right now because of your trauma reactions.
Yep. Yeah, you are absolutely right. You know, for soldiers, it's alcohol, it's gambling, it's anything that's going to provide dopamine, and it's going to be reacted quick, that they can go to. And it could be porn. It could be porn. It could be anything. You know, opiates. Um, you know, everything is out there. There's nothing off the table when it comes to that. At least in the veteran world, you know, I've seen a lot of people. I've been, you know, down there. I have worked through drinking, and you know, work is another thing. I used to be one of those guys that I would find something to do until the
Mhm.
time it was for me to go to sleep, to avoid having to deal with me.
Yep.
You know, as long as I was so exhausted when I went to sleep, that time of silence would be numbed with quickly falling asleep, and I would no longer have to think about those things, and it caught up with me, you know.
You know, we're seeing that more and more these days too with smartphones. You know, you've got people that will have a game or something on their phone. I'm guilty of this occasionally myself. They'll have a game and they will lay there in bed and play this game until they feel like, okay, now I think I'm ready to pass out, or they will absolutely fall asleep holding their phone in their hands.
Yep.
And this is a distraction. I finally ended up in therapy after the event happened in 2019. My first therapist was a mess. I traumatized her so bad she left the industry forever. She quit. Uh, so then I got a second one, and she was pretty good. She had already worked with other survivors of trafficking. And I went into her and I told her right off the bat, number one, don't come at me right away with medications. I'm not looking for a Band-Aid. I'm looking for a shovel. And number two, don't treat me like I am some fragile porcelain doll, because if I was going to break, I'd have done it already. But working with her, I guess it was probably about a month in, she said, how often do you sit in complete silence and think about nothing? It's like, what are you talking about? People do that?
Yeah. Wow.
She said, yes, people do that. And I want you to start practicing. I want you to do 5 minutes to start with. I said, I don't think I could do 5 minutes of not thinking about something. She said, I want you to try. Keep track of it. Keep a little journal. My first time I went 15 seconds.
Yeah.
It took me a while to kind of build this up. It was like building muscles in my body, except I was building this strength in my brain of being able to just relax. Stop panicking about everything. Chill out for a moment.
Yep.
It's gonna be okay. I had no idea people actually did this stuff though. How do you exist without thoughts in your brain?
Yeah. Oh, you were absolutely right. And I'm now on my first year of I'm literally put in the work, and I'm to the point now where I'm ready to try to slowly get off these medications. And I joined a group therapy, and I finally found something that worked for me. The VA system was not for me,
Yeah.
but not that they do bad things. I just their
Just doesn't
message
fit.
with me,
Yeah.
and so I'm happy in that aspect because I can see the difference and the progress and the things that I've worked through, and it does change your outlook on things when you can finally start to see that and look back. Because
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, I'm going to tell you that one, we would have never been having this topic because it would have made me think about things,
Yeah.
and the other thing, I would have never just been here sitting having conversations with people. I would have been looking for something to keep myself occupied to where I was exhausted at the end of the day. There's been times that I would just stay at work just to keep working because it comes down to, you people don't understand that depression and this type of stuff is like a wall, and you get used to living in that. And it doesn't seem to be unnormal. It just seems to be, it is what it is.
Right.
When you don't know that it's unnormal, I kind of relate it to somebody in a third world country, drinking hot water out of a well and happy because they've never had a Starbucks, and they don't know the difference because they never had it.
They're probably better off. Starbucks burns their coffee.
Yeah, I don't disagree. But my point being is, if you don't know it's out there, like you can no longer see it, then you don't know what happiness is,
Right.
And when I got put on the medication, I thought I'm good now because I didn't have these huge mood swings. But after a year or so of it, I realized I'm not so much good. I'm just covering things up, and I'm just here now.
The Band-Aid.
Yep.
And there's some medications that we desperately need in our lives. There are certain mental health aspects that cannot be treated otherwise. And it's important to understand the difference.
Yeah.
I knew going into the therapy that I went into that I didn't want to be numb to what I was feeling. I wanted to understand what I was feeling. I have a very analytical brain.
Mhm.
My whole reason to get into therapy was because I had done a lot of work over the years, but there were speed bumps that I couldn't get over.
Yeah.
I had lost momentum. And my world crumbled when that guy asked for my autograph and I realized what was going on and all this stuff was found. I didn't know how to pull through that. I didn't know how to survive that. People are telling me all the time, "Oh, you've been through worse." Really? I'm
Yeah.
not sure I have.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, that would be bad. I
Yeah.
really would, especially you put in so much work to try to put it behind you, you know, and unfortunately you physically put it behind you, but it wasn't mentally put behind you. And then somebody when you think, okay, now I can move forward, because you have to be able to do that. You have to get out of that environment first. You can't heal until your surroundings are at least controlled, you know.
Right.
Uh, I can't imagine,
It,
when you think that you're in that situation.
it wasn't even like somebody ripped off a Band-Aid either. Yeah, this was an old wound, but it was in a new form
Yeah.
of this old wound. It was like, oh, you put all your pieces back together. Here, let me cut your hand off.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
Just for the record, if the dickhead out there that is, don't do that. Just saying, if you're watching this show, don't do that. Grow up.
Right. Well, these days, I'm telling you, that man is far more afraid of me than I ever was of him because now I own my story and people know who he is.
Awesome. Good. Good. You know, that is there. There are so many things about social media that I hate, but there is a few channels out there. Mine ain't one of them, but there's a few out there that I absolutely love. That are doing good work. These ethical hackers that are, finding predators, finding scam artists and stuff like that. And these people that, these dads and that have daughters that are going on there and finding cyber predators and stuff, you know, good for them. If you can find them, and I don't care if you can't prove them, you can't put them in jail, but you can expose them, good, good. That is a good way to use social media because they're using it in a way, and it's war at that point, you
Yep.
know. So
Take
I'm
down the bad guys.
I'm glad that guy's name is in that book. That is good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Everything he did to me is in that book.
good.
All the mental mind games and everything. So anybody's going to have a fair warning on who that guy really is.
That's good because somebody that does that has, there's no way that he even sees the wrong in it.
No.
And so he's not going to change. So I know you're into art. How did that come about? Did that come from this as a form of therapy, or was you into art before all this?
That is exactly where it came from. So towards the end of my therapy, my therapist asked me, she said, I know you well enough now to know that you're not going to end your journey here. So what are you going to do next? And I told her, I said, I think I'm ready to write my book. And she said, oh, great. It was towards the end of November at the time of 2020. And she said, well, I'll check back in with you in January. We'll get through the holidays. If you need me, I'm here. But I'll check back in with you and see how it's going. So in January, she reached out. And she's like, so how's it going? And I said, I'm doing good. She said, no, I didn't ask how you were going. I said, how's it going? How's the book going? I said, oh, it's done. So I wrote that entire book in 30 days in the month of December. And when I was done with it, she said, well, now what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet. She said, I want you to try painting. I told her anytime I've ever tried to paint, it looks like a multicolored snowman melting in the snow. I don't know how to paint. She said, I don't care. I want you to try anyway. So I'm sending somebody over, the 2020, the whole pandemic thing. This is early 2021. She sent somebody over with canvases, paints, brushes, everything that I would need. Within 3 months, I had sold my first painting back to the anti-trafficking organization that paired me up with her in the first place. They made prints of it and sold the prints to be able to afford therapy for other survivors.
That is awesome.
Within 5 months, the Chicago Tribune got hold of the story and published a story on me after a home for survivors in Chicago put one of my paintings right there in their front entranceway.
That
And the
is
painting was called Carry Your Own Baggage, because we all have to carry our own baggage through life until we find a safe place to set it down.
that. Hey, let me tell you guys about an amazing organization that is being built right now. It is called Heroes Voices Media Foundation, and it is an organization that is using media to help veterans express themselves and tell their stories using media, as in podcasting, like the Two Drunk Dudes in a Gunroom show. It is also using music, like Gunroom Radio, and it is also using books like what is coming soon with Warrior Words. So if you would like to help, go check out Heroes Voice Media Foundation.org. You can find it at our Facebook page, and you can also find it in the description of this episode. So let's get back to the show. That is awesome. I think that is the best part of the story, because your trauma and your therapy has now turned into helping others at the same time of helping yourself. And I think that is amazing. That's exactly that's the best way that it can be done.
I always tell people I have to climb out of a hole that somebody else dug. That doesn't mean that I can't reach behind me as I go.
Yeah, you're right. That's kind of where my nonprofit came from. Was I realized about 3/4 through season 1 that podcasting was becoming my beginning portions of therapy. I was surrounding myself with other veterans, and the conversations would get to the point, and I'd forget that we're even live or streaming, and we would just be talking. And I would find myself talking to them about things that I hadn't talked to my wife about and everything else. And so when I realized that, and then I started having more veterans on, and it had different things that they needed, like, musicians that were trying to make a living from, telling their story through songs. That's where I decided to make a radio station that played nothing but veteran music, so that they didn't get buried under all these algorithms. After I did that, I was like, this really just needs to be a nonprofit, because I just started it. I had to turn it into a business so I could get the licensing through the copyright agencies. So I just did it as a sole proprietor, and I knew it wasn't going to make no money because I wasn't charging anything. And I did it that way. And then I decided, well, why don't we just do it as a nonprofit, and we'll incorporate podcasting, and then we'll incorporate the radio station for musicians. And then we're starting Warriors Words for authors to help them get published. And here in a couple weeks, if everything goes well, we'll have our first Roku channel, and we're bringing what's called MMTV. If you remember MTV, we're going to have military music television, and then podcast channels. So I think that, it's amazing how when you find something that becomes therapy and you turn it into a way that helped you so that it can help others. I think that's amazing.
I love this. I love what you're doing. I love everything about it. This is so cool.
Yeah. And when I heard your story, and then, I knew that the painting was therapy. I mean, art in all themes, whether it be writing or music or, painting, is its own therapy. But I had no idea about what it had done. So that is awesome.
So this is actually one of mine back on the wall behind me here. It is, let's just say, huge. I'm terrible at measurements. But up close, there is a tree on the cliff here that's hanging off the edge.
Yep.
It's reaching up for the sun. It's just a little bit of sun peeking through the clouds. And about halfway back on the cliff is a young lady standing on the top of the hill here. The tree used to be me. I was reaching for whatever piece of sunlight I could possibly grab a hold of, begging for the light. Now I'm the young lady in the middle of the cliff with my arms thrown out wide, my head back, the wind taking my hair, and enjoying every breath I've got.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And, that is cool the way, the story, the painting depicts that, because that is cool, and the other part about that is somebody who doesn't know that story, who is going through things, may look at that and take it a whole different way. It may have a different meaning to them,
Yeah.
And so that's the amazing part about, art, whether it be, like I said, music or, poems or whatever. It's going to mean whatever it means to the people that are interpreting it. But
Yeah.
as long as it means something to them, then it served what it's supposed to do. So
Absolutely. That's the whole reason that one was created. It's called To Be Free.
yeah, that makes perfect sense. And the cool part about that is how long have you been painting since you painted that?
Since January 2021 is when I started painting.
Wow.
And this one I just did last year.
That is really, really good.
Thank you.
And so did any of this come with lessons, or did somebody just drop off all the stuff and said YouTube and walked off?
Pretty much. It was January 2021, so everything was still in pretty much lockdown. So I got a notice that the stuff was at my front door. I had to go and drag it out of the doorway. I didn't even have anybody tell me to try YouTube. I just looked at all the pretty colors and went, I think I can do something with that. And since then, I've watched a couple of different things on YouTube, but none of those tutorials really have worked for me. I apparently have my own style of doing things, my own way. It goes with the red hair. I have my own way of doing pretty much everything that I do. So I just went at it. I just went for it.
That's good. I have my own way too. It's usually the hard way. So
me too. Yeah. My poor inner man.
Yeah, my wife will tell you that too. I'm notorious for that. So, so let me ask you this: the podcast. I know you have one on your bio, but you now are up to 4 podcasts. Let's talk about those.
Yes, it's a lot. So, my primary podcast I started in 2020. It was when I was still kind of floundering and trying to figure out where I was in life. 2019 was when everything kind of went haywire, and 2020 is about when I got paired up with the good therapist.
Okay.
I started the podcast because I had been a member of a small group of trafficking survivors here in the state of Colorado, and we had met every week. We were doing different classes and life skills and fun projects and art and all kinds of fun stuff. I lost that sense of community, and I didn't have it anywhere else in my world. So I did whatever I could to try and build that community. And if somebody reached out to me and told me, you should start a podcast, you've got an interesting story. So it started out with me either sitting in the closet floor or in my car at the DMV, whining into the phone. Yeah. That was my first season of the podcast. The second season of the podcast, I had just published my book. So I started reading a chapter a day of my book. And I did that for about a year because there's 42 chapters. It's not exactly short. When I was done with the book, I had already figured out about halfway through that there were a lot of other people who had also written their stories about overcoming adversities and trials and traumas, and their voices weren't being heard. I had a platform. Why not give the platform to them? Yep. So now I interview other authors who have written their stories. That is my primary podcast. Everything else just kind of followed. And it followed quickly this year. So I started off this year with only the one podcast going into season 4. Yeah. Now I've got 4. So one of the podcasts started in February of this year. My co-host is a lady in Australia. She and I talk about what the different trauma reactions are, what the long-term consequences are of not dealing with them, and then how to retrain your brain and fight back against it. But we do it while having this kind of banter back and forth, and her Australian accent's always a pleasure to listen to anyway.
Yeah.
But we have this great relationship, this total friendship, and we look forward to getting together every single week. We tell funny stories about different trauma reactions, how they showed up in our lives, and how crazy probably the rest of the world perceived us to be at the moment. From road rage incidents to flushing stuff down the toilet that probably should never go into the toilet. And these are all these trauma reactions and how they show up. We have a blast with it. The third podcast I started back in April of this year, and it's called That's a Phobia. And phobias, of course, tie in really strongly to trauma in a lot of cases. So basically, these are like 1 to 2 minute episodes. They're super short. But I try to pronounce the word first, and then I spell it, and then I try to pronounce it again, because a lot of times I can pronounce it better after I try to spell it out. I still butcher it, but then I give the definition of what it actually is. And I look to see if there's anybody who was famous who ever admitted to having this phobia. It's like Tom Cruise is terrified of heights. Not too many people know that, since he's actually done his own stunts jumping out of airplanes.
Yeah.
He conquers that fear. I love that. I don't like him really all that much as an actor, but I do have a lot of respect for that part of him. So the last podcast, it officially launches January 1st. So I guess I can't say I'm finishing the year with 4, only 3. But the last one is called Pod Zeal. And it's all about having podcast hosts talk about why they got into podcasting, what's their show about, who they are behind the scenes. And I love this concept because there's so many people who, I mean, if they're listening to your show, they're getting little snippets of who you are. They're hearing pieces of why you got started. They're not hearing who inspired you. They're not understanding anything about what goes on behind the scenes or what software you're using to be able to create your podcast. And that's what it's all about. Give them the behind the scenes stuff. Show them who you are as the podcaster.
Yeah.
And it's super easy for me, because it's 5 to 7 minute videos, hopefully, where the podcasters can record it locally on their own computers and then send it and share it to me, so that it's going to be the highest video quality and I don't have to do an interview.
Yeah, it works. Yeah. And you are absolutely right, because I'm gonna make a little fool of myself. But before I started doing all this stuff, when I was younger and uneducated, I used to say that content creating was the millennial panhandling. Oh, I was like, why don't they just go get a job instead of getting online and begging for money? Oh, I said a funny joke. Give me my tip, And then I started doing this, and I was like, oh, wow, I should go get a job, because it would be a lot easier.
Right.
This is not easy stuff, man. I spend a lot of hours with one podcast. There's no way I could manage. My OCD would never allow me to do 4 podcasts the way I want to do them. So
yeah, it gets a little awkward. And my co-host and I on the Growth from Darkness podcast, we only get together once a week, and it's at this exact same time every Thursday for me, Friday mornings for her, because of the time change difference. And we spend the first, I don't know, half hour to an hour just catching up.
Yeah.
Just chatting. And it's almost like this therapy session. We're just getting together as a couple of gal pals. We can't go out and have a coffee or a tea. We're just having our weekly friends date.
Yep.
And we happen to get a little work done while we're at it.
Yeah. And that's what, anybody that talks to me, one of our programs, like I said, it's helping people get through podcasting and keep them podcasting. Because if you think you're going to be the next Joe Rogan or this big famous person, and every hour you're checking your stats to see how many downloads, you're probably not going to be podcasting after 60 days, because you're going to get pretty frustrated. And then you're going to realize, I keep spending all this money and I'm not getting any money. And then you're going to realize, I'm not going to be the next Joe Rogan. And next thing you know, you're going to quit. But this whole time, you've slowly been getting pieces of your story off your chest and getting some of that anger and everything out. They're trying to tell your story. And so, I'm not saying podcasting is therapy, but if it keeps you and gets you talking and can get you associated with like-minded people that, hey, maybe you can call and talk to when you're having a bad day, it keeps a gun out of your mouth, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
that's been probably one of the greatest blessings of having my main podcast. You know, I'll get together with these people and talk to them. It only airs once a week, but I've done so many interviews, I may have to start doing twice a week. These people are incredible, and they all have these stories of overcoming everything that they've been through. I
yeah,
have talked to so many people now that have done this that I've picked up little pieces of their story, and I've learned how to incorporate it into my own healing.
yeah,
Yeah. I'm hoping that it can still reach other people and try to pull them out of that place of trauma and resentment and pain and depression and anger and hatred, and pull them out into a place where they can start working on trying to heal a lot of that.
yep.
But if I never am able to do that for anybody else, I've definitely done it for myself.
And that's why I tell everybody, I don't care if one person watches my show or 10,000. You know, I enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy the conversations. Up to this point, it has always been about veterans, and now I've expanded out to just stories that I find interesting, and I enjoy the conversations. So when you're doing anything that you're enjoying, I don't consider it work. So that's the way I look at it. It's fun, and I don't, if 1,000 people watch it or one person watches it for 10 seconds, I'm happy. It doesn't matter to me. So
We
that,
need to have passion for what we're doing. What we're
it,
doing is important, even if it's only important really to us.
yep.
It's
Well,
important.
if you don't, you won't podcast for long.
Oh,
Because
right. Right.
if you're doing it for the stats and you're trying to be fake and you're trying to find the latest topic that people are trending and watching to talk about, your listeners are gonna know that you don't know what you're talking about. For one, you did a 30 minutes worth of research and you tried to make an hour video of something that you only know 30 minutes about. And whatever you're talking about, you found it through Google, and everybody else that you're talking to has already seen that. So you did a piss poor job. And
Right.
so that's why you're not getting your listeners, because they see through it.
Yeah.
You have to be authentic. That's what it comes down to.
Absolutely. And you have to do it for the right reasons too. It's
Yep.
like you said, people that are wanting to do it to be the next Joe Rogan are doing it for all the wrong reasons. I run into this all the time with people that are trying to write their book. They get frustrated because their book doesn't sell. Your first book hardly ever sells. Your first book is hardly going to get any reviews at all. If you are writing your story, you're writing your book because you want to be a famous author, you're doing it for all the wrong reasons. That is not the reason to get in and get down with pencil and paper.
My first book, I wrote it for 7 people. I wrote it for my kids, my wife, and I sent it to 3 people in my group therapy and a close friend. And that's what I wrote it for. The main purpose was for my kids. I felt that they were owed an explanation of what had happened to me from the time that before deployments, and then, by the time they were in their teenage years and were old enough to see that things were not right. But I never talked about it. Whenever I came home from deployments, I always said, hey, everything's good, no problems, but my actions didn't say that. And I just never told them about things that went on over there. So I put it all in a book for them to read, and I'm leaving it up to them whether they want me to publish it or not. But the main purpose was for me to explain to my wife and my kids, what had happened and why it had happened. It wasn't an apology. I can't take anything back, but at least it's an explanation, and I can put pieces together for you, and
Yeah.
we can move on from there,
I
But,
wish my grandfather had done something like that. He fought in World War II and the Korean War. And we never knew anything of what happened. But I
it's
remember seeing the shadows of darkness on his eyes occasionally.
Yeah. My wife didn't sleep in the same bed with me for like 2 years.
Wow.
She said she got tired of me elbowing her and yelling at night and,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And
I do that.
oh, I get it.
Yeah.
And for years she would ask me, what the dreams were about, and I just told her I don't remember. I knew what they were. I just,
Yeah.
I
How
don't
do you
remember.
put this into words?
Yeah.
I have to deal with that with my husband. Occasionally, apparently, I don't even realize I do it, but I do pretty much the same thing. Or I'll wake up screaming and he's trying to calm me down and he's asking me, what happened? What happened? I don't know. That's not always true.
It's
It
not.
is occasionally true, but it's not always true.
When you're first waking up and coming out of that, one thing you don't want to do is just go back and explain and relive what you just went
Right.
through.
And you also don't want to go straight back to sleep because you're terrified it's going to happen again.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times I would get up and go to work. That's what I was doing, and
I'd read a book.
Yeah. No, I get it. And it's frustrating because I thought I was helping when I was doing it, and the reality was I was not giving them any understanding of what was going on, so I was making it worse.
Yeah. They probably felt a little helpless, wanting to help their loved one.
Oh,
not sure what to do.
Yep. So, well, I absolutely love this. Where if they want to buy your books, or I've had your website going down through the bottom, and I'm going to put all of your podcasts. So wherever this gets posted, wherever you're seeing it, in the description there will be all your podcasts for people to watch. But is there any specific places that they can go to get your book, or can they get it from your websites? Or
They can get it from my website. They can find them on Amazon or on Barnes and Noble. I'm really big on Barnes and Noble for whatever reason. It's like my favorite place. But I have 13 books total, so don't be overwhelmed by that.
All right. Awesome. Absolutely. And I will go through Amazon and I'll find a few of those and throw some of those links in there too as well. So we will get it out, and we will get the world to know about it. I appreciate this. I learned a lot, especially at the beginning, because I'm going to be honest. I definitely was in some of those misnomers. My pictures were definitely on the side of society and of what people think too. But it makes a lot more sense now that we've had this conversation.
I'm glad I was able to help. I have never yet talked to somebody who had it right 100%. So you're in a good group of people.
Yeah, it's a very complicated situation. And I think it's hard to get that information because, unfortunately, there's also motives out there too. Some people, they want to share those stories, but they want to share it in a way that can be monetized too. They want the likes and the clicks and the views and so.
And taking the story of a survivor of any kind of trauma, but especially human trafficking, and using it for your own benefit, like to line your own pockets or line the pockets of a company, is a further form of exploitation, no different than the man who put me up on the pornography website to make more money off of me.
Yep, absolutely.
It's exploitation.
Yep.
Don't take somebody else's story for your own benefit. Absolutely.
I agree. 100%. Well, if you don't mind holding on, we'll throw the exit video up, and we'll chit chat for a few minutes and let everything download, and we'll be done. Sound good?
Fantastic. This was fun.
I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
All right. You guys take care. Be safe. Have a good day.